Recently on the news, I have been hearing about an issue where children have lower cognitive ability relative to previous generations. Can you go into more detail for me? What could be causing the decline in cognitive ability? All right, here we go. Let's have a look. What you're hearing about in the news is a very real area of study in psychology and so sociology. Okay, so psychology is the study of people, right? The mind and behavior. Psychology is the study of mind and behavior. In sociology, I assume society and how people interact with society, but let's get a. Sociology is the scientific study of human society, social relationships, and interaction. So the study of human society. Okay, that one makes sense. For nearly a century, average IQ scores rose consistently by about 3 points per decade, a phenomenon known as the Flynn effect, driven by better nutrition, expanded education, and healthier childhoods. However, over the last couple of decades, researchers have documented a shift in many developed nations, including Canada, the US, UK, and Scandinavia. Scores on standardized cognition tests, cognitive tests, have plateaued or begun to dip. Scientists call this the reverse Flynn effect. Importantly, researchers have found this decline occurring within the same families, meaning younger brothers scoring lower than older brothers. This proves this. There was a TikTok I was looking at, and the guy was talking about how they were trying to teach his daughter how to do long division, and it was stupid. It was stupid. Okay, like they were trying to teach her. I don't even know the method, but it's completely different than I learned how to do long division. The digital shift. So these are the primary factors researchers point to. So they've done the tests with younger brothers scoring lower than older brothers. So literally this is something that is actively getting worse, and is actively being failed on. It's not a genetic thing. It's not because you're getting your vaccines or whatever. there appears to be actual something we're actively doing. Oh, I looked down a little bit. That's gonna be nasty. Okay. The digital shift. Shorter media and cognitive offloading. The rapid rise of smartphones, tablets, and short form algorithms has radically changed how children use their brains. Deep reading versus skimming. Immersive reading builds vocabulary, verbal reasoning, and sustained attention. The displacement of books by short, fast paced digital media has led to measurable drops in verbal and vocabulary test scores. So, the creation of things like TikTok and Instagram and the ones that are like the swipes, where you're swiping continuously, that essentially replaced media like books, and it more actively has done that. And obviously, if you read less, you're going to have a worse score in verbal and vocabulary test scores. I mean, I don't know. I've always liked reading myself, but that's one of those weird things. Like, I remember when I was younger, I was like, why would you read? Why would you read for entertainment? So it was definitely something I picked up when I got a bit older. So I don't know. But that's basically technology, right? Short form algorithms. All right. Cognitive offloading. When a device handles navigation, remember facts, and solves immediate problems, the brain relies less on its own working memory and spatial skills. I mean, like, I wish YouTube would do this. Because I need a whole other chart. Where is it? Oh, I gave it its own chart. Let's pull it up. Let's pull it up. The rating system. I have a whole chart for how I find good content. And that's because the YouTube system is not is not set up to assist me with this. It just gives you like a recommendation, and I mean, I don't know about you, but the recommendations kind of suck. Let's pull this up for later, and we'll see what it recommends next. At issue, Carney fends off recession accusations. Maybe. Oh, I mean, meh. I mean, nothing has beat the TikTok algorithm for me personally. That one, yeah, that we're not learning that. No, the TikTok algorithm is great, and then the YouTube algorithm is kind of just meh. So, cognitive offloading. When a device handles navigation, remembers facts, so this is like Facebook remembering birthdays and stuff like that. You don't have to. And solves immediate problems. Okay. The brain relies less on its working memory and spatial skills. So that's another technology one. Ooh, okay. This one I know is going to be bad. Pandemic era disruptions. Like there is a certain cohort of children that really missed very formative, like a very formative year at school. And they were kind of just moved forward and expected to continue on without that formative year. And it has not worked. Like you almost needed to stop schooling entirely and just be like, okay, you missed your fourth year, you got to redo the fourth year. Like you did your third year, pandemic hit, you learned from home for your fourth year, but then you go back and you do your fourth year again because it was that disruptive of an event, and that is not what they did. They continued the children forward, and it shows problems, and it shows problems for a lot of people. The timeline of cognitive research also highlights a sharp acute drop linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. A long-term study by researchers at Harvard and UC Berkeley traced children from 2018 to 2023 and found a significant drop in executive functioning, the mental skills used to focus, follow mid-step instruction, and practice impulse control. For an average 8-year-old in the study, standardized executive function scores dropped by about 7.5 points. This is largely distributed to the extreme disruption of losing structured school routines, predictable schedules, and face-to-face peer socialization during critical development windows. What was the time frame that children's schooling got disrupted for during the pandemic? Was it a full year? The timeline of school disruption is a bit tricky question because it depends on how you define disrupted. If you mean complete physical building closure where children were sent home and standard schooling froze entirely, it wasn't a full year in most parts of North America. However, if you mean the broader window of system disruption, including erratic hybrid schedules, mandatory isolation periods, and rolling circuit breaker closures, and bare bones remote learning, the disruption lasted well over a full year, and in some regions closer to 2. Oh, oh. In my brain, I'm like, this was less than a year. It was less than a year full of like full closure. But there's this whole thing around hybrid schedules, rolling circuit breaker closures, bare bones remote learning. So there's the whole set of other factors that probably also had a massive impact on children. And this went on for closer to 2 years in some regions. Well over a full year, and in some regions closer to 2. That's a significant setback. Phase 1, total shutdown. We're not going to go into too much detail. 3 to 4 months. Phase 2, the academic year chaos. Duration 10 months. This is the period that truly matches the full year description, while some rural or politically conservative regions prioritize keeping classrooms open. The vast majority of students experienced massive disruptions for these 10 months. The rolling closures and backlog. Even after vaccines became widely available, the arrival of the Delta and Omicron variant caused a third wave of disruption. Many provinces and states delayed returning from winter break in January 2022, tacking on extra weeks of sudden remote learning to act as circuit breakers for transmission. Data, total time lost. UNESCO and economic tracking data shows that between March 2020 in summer 2021, total structured in-person schooling time dropped by an average of 55% in the United States. In Canada, public schools were closed for an average of 6 consecutive months between March and September alone. When you layer on the fractured 2020-2021 school year and the Omicron disruption of 2022, many children spent 18 to 24 months without experiencing a single normal, uninterrupted week of childhood education and socialization. It is that long, sustained period of instability, rather than just the few months at home, that researchers point to when explaining the subsequent drop in executive functioning and cognitive test scores. So, like 2 years of math disruption. That is terrifying. Okay, I gotta update. What I'm talking about. 1 second here. Okay, Twitch. We're done with the weekly news recap. We're gonna update. Kick. And YouTube. Okay. Alright. That's good. So yeah, 2 years of disruption. So then did they just essentially miss 2 years of class? Like, Did children have to repeat the grades that were largely disrupted, or were they moved on? For the vast majority of students across Canada and the United States, they were moved on to the next grade rather than being held back to repeat the year. School districts almost universally relied on a practice known as social promotion, the policy of passing students to the next grade level with their peers to mandate social cohesion and emotional stability, even if they hadn't fully mastered the academic material. This decision was driven, like, there is a certain age group where learning from home is just not effective. Like, it's just for young children, trying to get them in front of a computer learning from home is just not effective. It's basically nothing. And so large disruptions for 2 years, like, no wonder they see a large cognitive decline. This decision was driven by several massive practical and psychological challenges, though it created a whole new set of issues downstream. The snowball effect. While moving kids forward kept the system flowing logistically, it effectively kicked the academic problems down the road. This practice is a major reason why researchers are still seeing depressed cognitive and standardized test scores years later. In subjects like mathematics and reading, learning is strictly cumulative. If a student missed out on fractions or reading fluency in their third grade but was promoted to the fourth grade anyway, they were suddenly expected to learn advanced decimals and text analysis without the foundational bricks in place. Yeah, like, so much of schooling is you teach and then you build on what you teach, and the next year you build on what you teach, and then you build on what you teach. And if a layer just isn't there, you can't learn the next one. And then you can't learn the next one because you're missing the one. And so at best you have a shoddy foundation. And the foundation is important. Instead of repeating grades, schools attempted to bridge this gap using a strategy called learning acceleration, trying to teach missing past concepts in line while simultaneously teaching current level material. I had university professors do this because at university, you got kids from a wide range of subjects, like from a wide range of schools, right? So you can't guarantee they've all been taught something, and so they'd have to essentially really quickly teach you the underlying principles and building blocks and then start to build on it. And so, like, first year of university, there's a lot of relearning stuff that you already know. At least it was that way for me. And funding massive summer school tutoring programs. However, data tracking long-term proficiency highlights that playing catch up while moving forward has left many cohorts permanently behind their pre-pandemic counterparts. Like, being a kid in the pandemic was rough. Like, that was that. It sounds like that was rough. As much as schools closing for 3 months would have sounded great to me back when I was a kid, the system was not designed for that in any way. Okay, number 3. Changes in play and physical lifestyle. The way children spend their leisure time has undergone a massive structural shift over the last few decades. Loss of independent creative play. Unstructured outdoor free play forces children to navigate risks, negotiate rules with peers, and solve physical problems. The decline of free play in favor of structured activities or sedentary screen time has impacted spatial intelligence and executive functioning. that one, huh? So they're blaming the sedentary screen time and structured activities. So unstructured outdoor free play was something that is important for children and something that they don't get enough of now. Is replaced with structured activities and sedentary screen time. Okay. Sleep and sedentary habits. Increased screen exposure, especially before bed, has chronically impacted sleep quality. Oh crap, well that's something I'm probably... I probably do that one too. Apparently you're not supposed to have screen time before bed. But I like to read before bed. And unfortunately I read on a screen. Increased screen exposure, especially before bed, has chronically impacted sleep quality. Sleep deprivation directly hinders the brain's ability to consolidate memories and process complex information. Like, I figured this one out in university where before an exam, like everyone crams before an exam, right? Like so many people stay up late, pull an all-nighter, and the thing I found worked best is to make sure you get your 8 hours of sleep. So like give yourself 10 hours, a 10-hour block to sleep, because before an exam, you usually have problems sleeping anyway. Before an exam, and you just do better. You just do better. Make like still cram study. Like cram studying does work, but ensure 8 to 10 hours of sleep before an exam, and you perform better. So it's just lived experience. Sleep deprivation directly hinders the brain's ability to consolidate memories and process complex information. You don't want to go into exam sleep deprived. Worst thing you can do. Okay. The environmental ceiling. Some researchers argue that the original Flynn effect simply reached its natural limit. During the 20th century, Western nations dramatically raised the floor of childhood health by eliminating major infectious diseases, expanding public education, and removing toxins like lead from gasoline and paint. I see that. So once you can only get so much improvement by improving the quality of education and the quality of nutrition and there's only so much improvement you can get there until you're teaching children, right? And then you're hitting like peak ability for the child to learn. And so naturally there will be a ceiling to the Flynn effect. And they're just stating that kind of hit it. Like we've gotten rid of the lead from gasoline. Public education is pretty good. I mean, I think it's being attacked in a lot of ways right now. But it's still pretty good. Getting rid of infectious diseases, we've done a lot of stuff to improve, but that would show a plateau, and we are seeing a dip, from my understanding. So that certainly doesn't explain the dip. Once a population reaches near universal access to adequate nutrition and basic schooling, you hit a ceiling. Additional tweaks in an already optimized environment yield diminishing returns, leaving the population more sensitive to the negative environmental factors listed above. A crucial nuance. Psychologists emphasize that a drop in specific test scores does not mean modern children lack mental capacity. IQ tests heavily measure abstract logic, mathematical matrices, and specific verbal structures. Modern children may simply be adapting to an environment that rewards lightning fast visual processing, multitasking, and digital literacy, skills that traditional cognitive tests aren't designed to measure. Oh, this is the one. Like, everyone thinks the next generation is like doomed, right? Every generation has thought the generation coming after them is doomed. We now blame it on technology and smartphones, but modern children may simply be adapting to an environment that rewards lightning fast visual processing, multitasking, and digital literacy. These are skills that traditional cognitive tests aren't designed to measure. And so, where we see a decline in the traditional test scores, we could be seeing an increase in other areas that we're just not traditionally testing. And so it's not necessarily that children are getting dumber. I mean, the pandemic era disruptions are just going to be a problem. Like that sucks. 2 years there, it sucks. But other than that, there could just be a change in what's and how in the environment children are in, and therefore in the their cognitive ability, away from skills that traditional cognitive tests measure. Okay, how do I where was I here? Want to look closer at the Harvard study on pandemic era executive function drop. What is executive function? Let me just define executive function. A set of mental skills that act as the brain's management system. Attention inhibitions, goal settings, organizing, cognitive reflexibility, working memory, self-monitoring. Okay. Located primarily in the prefrontal cortex, it helps you plan, focus, attention, manage emotions, and juggle multiple tasks to achieve goals. Like, in my opinion, we are doing like a lot of things wrong. Like, I tried out that Roblox game. That's kind of scary. Like, everything wrong with predatory monetization is like dialed to 10 in that game. And I mean, maybe he's teaching kids about money, but there's a lot of concerning things there. I don't know how to fix that, but I really think there should be more regulation, specifically around social media applications that are used by children. We see this, I think it is Manitoba in Canada is starting to look at a social media ban for children. But like, I consider things like Roblox social media or social media adjacent. And they should be incorporated inside the ban. Okay, where was I? it's gonna be so hard to test this theory, the nuance, um, when this exists, because this is just a very real disruption that is going to affect them no matter what, right? So then children that are in a different environment may be developing skills that are not traditionally measured by cognitive tests. Is there any information or reports on this? What am I thinking of here? Not reports. Studies. Some children that are in a different environment may be developing skills that are not traditionally measured by cognitive. Let's see. Yes, absolutely. This is one of the most fascinating arguments in modern cognitive science. Many psychiatrists, psychologists. Is that different than psychiatrist? Psychologist. Define. Mental health professional who studies the human mind and behavior. What happened to my text guy?
Psychologist.
Okay. Just making sure. Many psychologists and media researchers argue that standardized IQ tests are simply suffering from measurement bias. Traditional cognitive tests were designed in the 20th century to measure skills valued by an industrial and early information economy. Linear logic, mathematical matrices, vocabulary depth, and working memory retention. Modern children, often referred to as digital natives, I mean, that's so weird to me. Like, when I was a kid, like, I remember we had like one black and white TV when I was really young. And then like pretty early we got one of those really big, like thick TVs that you like, the ones you can't carry yourself and you have to have multiple people. One of those color TVs, and that was crazy. And these kids are just growing up with iPads and cell phones. Like, it's going to be an entirely different generation. I mean, I still remember the sound of dialing into the internet. Like that's always going to be with me. And then your mom wants to make a call, and so you got to get off the internet and you can't talk to friends because your mom's got to make a call. And the phone and the internet use the same connection for some stupid reason. I'm just sending text messages to friends from school. Why? Why can't this use a different line than the cell phone, than the landline? Oh God. Okay, modern children, often referred to as digital natives, are growing up in a completely different sensory and technological ecosystems. Studies show that their brains are adapting to this environment by developing specialized cognitive skills that traditional IQ tests are completely blind to. Researchers highlight several areas of cognitive adaptation: high-speed visual spatial processing and four-dimensional thinking. Oh, like. Because children interact heavily with dynamic, High resolution 3D environments such as complex video games like Minecraft, Roblox, or fast-paced simulators. I mean, I really like Minecraft. High-paced simulators. Their visual processing systems are highly developed. I mean, I remember, what was it? Portal. That Portal, the first Portal game, you walk around with a portal gun. I tried to get my mom to play that a long time ago. No idea how. Like, to me, moving around in like a virtual world, it's just like it's like hardwired in. Like, you throw me in any game, and I can pretty much figure the controls out instantly, and then be able to move around and do the basic things. Obviously, the advanced controls they teach you in the beginning of every game. The basics are there, and it sounds like the younger generation are digital natives, and that's even more just ingrained into them. Their visual processing systems are highly developed. Spatial tracking. Studies on gaming and digital media interaction show that modern children are exceptionally good at tracking multiple moving objects simultaneously and mapping complex 3D spaces mentally. Okay. Temporary spatial correlation. Some cognitive researchers note that younger generations like Gen Z and Gen Alpha show an advanced ability to correlate time and space differently, sometimes described as four-dimensional thinking, due to growing up with real-time interactive digital interfaces rather than static two-dimensional text. Okay. Advanced ability to correlate time and space differently. What? Four-dimensional thinking? Can you go into more detail about temporal spatial correlation? What do you mean by correlate time and space differently? Okay, well, it's thinking that. No, stop. Stop trying to grab my attention. Rapid information filtering and hyper-reading. Traditional testing measures reading comprehension by asking a child to sit with a long linear piece of text and digest it deeply, kind of like what I'm trying to do here. The new skill. In digital environments, the brain adapts to hyper-reading, rapid scanning vast screens of text, filtering out noise, ads, irrelevant sidebars, and parsing for specific data points in seconds. I mean, like, just get an ad blocker for that one. Not hard. Well, this looks like a lack of attention on a traditional slow-paced reading test is actually a highly efficient cognitive strategy for an environment defined by information overload. I mean, to be fair, they're going to be living a life in information overload. That's kind of just the thing now. So being able to deal with it, like, there's still a lot of predatory stuff, specifically like monetization. But even when I was a kid, like, the ads directed at children on children's programming, so that you then go out and buy a specific thing or nag your parents to get a specific thing. Now it's just Roblox instead of, Pokemon cards or whatever it was trying to get me to buy back then. Parallel processing, multitasking architecture. I mean, like, I multitask way too much. There were times in my life where I found I had one thing on one, like a background news or something on one monitor. I would be playing a game or watching anime or doing something on the other monitor, and then I'd have my phone out and I'd be playing a gacha game on my phone. So I was doing like three things at the same time, and I was just like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I still throw stuff up on the. I like background noise. that is occasionally entertaining. So a lot of background YouTube nowadays. Well, cognitive psychologists maintain that the human brain cannot truly focus on two complex cognitive tasks at the same time without a performance drop. Modern children are highly adept at task switching or parallel processing. They can navigate a digital interface, monitor a live chat stream, filter background audio, and execute a task sequentially at speed that older generations find overwhelming. Well, nothing going on in my live stream to monitor. I don't gotta worry about that one right now. Navigate digital interface, filter background audio, and execute a task sequentially. Oh my gosh, that word. I said it wrong the first time, and now it'll be wrong in my brain unless I fix it.
Sequentially.
Sequentially. Is my music still on? Yeah. Oh, I got errors. I'll leave those up. I'll deal with them later. I keep removing songs from the list, and then when it tries to play the song, it doesn't like it. Throws up an error. Their mental architecture is optimized for a high stimulus, multi-layered environment rather than a quiet, single-focused testing room. And unfortunately, this is all testing. All the testing rooms you're going to be in, like single-focused, quiet testing room. The big debate: skill versus capacity. The debate among scientists spills into two schools of thought regarding the shift. The decline school argues that fundamental cognitive machinery, like the working memory capacity required to hold complex formulas in your head, is genuinely shrinking because we outsource it to devices. I mean, this is the thing, right? We outsourced basic math to calculators a long time ago. And honestly, that's what lets you do fluid dynamics, because you don't have to do all the little calculations. You can now focus on a larger problem. What if this is just the continuation of that, right? This is where I largely see AI as something that it'll allow you to it'll allow you to target and try and solve a larger problem, because the smaller problems it can just solve for you. So I don't know if cognitive offloading, like you still got to teach people, like they still teach you how to multiply and divide, but as soon as they teach it to you, it's like, oh, here's a calculator, it'll do it all for you. You're not going to worry about that ever again. You'll have one in your pocket rest of your life. So I don't know. The adaptation school argues that machinery is fine, it is just being wired for efficiency. Why spend mental energy memorizing facts or calculating numbers when a device does it instantly? The brain is simply saving energy for other tasks. I know. Like, for me, it's got to keep every World of Warcraft dungeon, every classic World of Warcraft dungeon, the map of it, it's got to keep it all in the head for some reason. I don't know why, but they're all still there. Haven't touched the game in like 5 years. I could still draw you every single dungeon and every single mob placement for every classic dungeon. It was the best way to level up. I did it way too many times. I mean, it's permanent now. One thing that also changed for me is when I learned how to do this. And now I don't. Let's pull this up. And now I don't need to remember how to spell words because it just does it for me. It's beautiful. I mean, I couldn't spell the words anyway, but now I don't got to try and remember. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, where was I? We're doing this one. The takeaway. If you took a brilliant scientist from 150 years ago and dropped them into a modern digital workflow, they might freeze under the sheer volume and speed of the data. If you take a modern 12-year-old and give them a 150 years 1950s logic test, they might score poorly because their brain hasn't been trained to focus linearly without stimulus. It isn't necessarily that children are losing raw intelligence. Their brains are just optimizing for a completely different world. What should we be doing to ensure our children are best suited mentally for a changing world? Should we be removing devices or leaning into them in schools? Because there's that whole debate, like they're trying to get devices out of schools, and is that is that really the answer? Um, I don't know, right? Because like, technology outside of like a nuclear war that destroys all humanity, technology is not gonna just suddenly go backwards, right? Um, what we currently have is only going to get better. I mean, there will be periods of enshittification. Certainly, I imagine ChatGPT will lean into ads at some point and it'll enshittify the product. Uh, but generally, technology is only going to get better from this point forward. And it appears to be getting better at an increasingly accelerating pace. Like, it's actually kind of terrifying when you start thinking about, like, where are we going to be in 30 years? Because the rate of advancement is so fast. And AI is going to make it so much faster. Yeah, maybe I'll talk about that another time. Let me put this over here. Where will we be? See, it's still nice to just write it out sometimes. The dictation little thing hasn't completely taken over. All right, let's have a look. Preparing children for a rapidly changing world isn't about choosing between a 1950s chalkboard or a 100% digital classroom. The consensus among developmental psychologists, neuroscientists, and educational policy experts is that extreme solutions, completely removing devices or mindlessly leaning into them, both fail children. Instead, the goal is to build a healthy relationship with technology by distinguishing between active cognitive engagement and passive consumption, while fiercely protecting the non-digital experiences that build the brain's physical architecture. Fiercely protecting the non-digital experiences that build the brain's physical architecture. Here is how we navigate this balance at home and in schools. In schools, shift from substitute to transformation. Many school districts made the mistake of using technology as a mere substitute for traditional learning, reading a flat PDF on a screen instead of a physical book. Research shows that reading on screens encourages fast skimming rather than deep comprehension, and students retain less information. Really? So just the act of reading on a screen causes a fundamental change Rather than deep comprehension, students retain less information and skim more. Encourages fast skimming rather than deep comprehension. Okay. Instead, the American Academy of Pediatrics and Educational Framework recommend the EdTech Triangle, which filters technology use based on its cognitive value. Ban the disruptive and passive. There is a massive, highly successful movement across North America and Europe to implement strict smartphone ban during the school day. I think that's a good idea. Like, I personally think kids really shouldn't have smartphones, but like, I understand the desire to want to be able to call, or if your child has an issue, for them to be able to call you. But that also comes with like uncontrolled access to social media, and there needs to be, I personally feel, a social media ban. But we kind of got to get to the digital ID stage of humanity before we can truly enforce something like that. And I don't see anyone doing the digital ID stuff right yet. Like, you kind of got to do it from a government level thing. But maybe, I mean, either way, smartphones banned during the school day, probably great. I didn't really have a smartphone until university, but that was because that's when they become available. So there was an incident. I remember I had my first flip phone, and I lost it while drunk in a field. And I remember falling over. I got tripped or something. I fell in the field, and then when I got home, I didn't have my flip phone. I was like, oh shit. And then I went out, and that's when I got my first actual, like, the first thing that looks like an actual smartphone. Because they were the new product coming out at the time, and whoa, was that a change? Like, we do got to thank Apple for that one. I don't like Apple products, but once in a while they do have a banger. And the design of the first smartphones, it came from Apple, and you know what? It's great. Like, we still use it to this day. All right. When personal phones are removed, academic focus rebounds and face-to-face socialization drastically increases. The other thing I see that is an issue is, in schools today, there is a mentality of no one left behind. And what this does is, like, children have varying degrees of intelligence. They just do. And when you push something like no one left behind, what ends up happening is you drag your intelligent students down, because the child that is the problem can't be separated from the rest of the class. And so therefore the teacher can't teach as much, and the learning of all the students suffers because of it. And so that is something that we should really address. I think you should be able to, one, like, you need to be able to separate children that are a problem from the rest of the class. Like, I mean, let me see something. Which one? What percentage of children are held back in public school for a year? Has this percentage gone up or down over the years? Because I feel like holding children back used to be so much more common, and it wasn't like as yeah. Okay, well, I mean, the graph directly shows What is that? That no. You were doing so good. You're missing the 3 on that one. So close. You're getting so much better at charts. If you're talking about being held back a grade retention in US public schools, it's actually much less common today than it was a few decades ago. Children haven't gotten smarter. I'm just going to say it. The same percentage of kids that were dumb in my generation are dumb in this generation. According to data from the U.S. National Center of Educational Statistics, in 2000, about 3.1%. Okay, yeah. And in 2016, that's gone way down to 1.9. That means roughly 1 out of every 3 students was held back in 2000, compared to with about 1 out of every 53 students in 2016. Here's the trend. Why has it gone down? Several factors contributed. Schools increasingly adopt social promotion, moving students with their age group. Research found that holding students back often produces only short-term academic gains and can increase the risk of dropping out later. Oh, so there's negatives of holding kids back. But if a kid isn't academically performing enough to move forward, many districts shifted towards intervention such as tutoring, summer schools, reading support, and individualized assistance instead of retention. Okay. So there's reasons, and they actually think it's better to not hold them back, to keep them with their social cohort. Either way, from what I've seen, yeah. Okay. Where was I? Let's continue. What else should we be doing? Limit the supportive. Laptops and tablets should not be the default medium for everyday worksheets, spelling, or basic math drills. When I was in university, I was still using pen and paper. There were laptops at that stage. And they'd actually been out for a while, and I did have quite a few friends that brought laptops and did everything digitally to my classes. But I mean, to me, I've always learned by writing. Like, when I study, I will rewrite the important facts, because that's just how my memory works. Like, my memory will see the paper and it'll be like, okay, I need to remember this. It was 2/3 down the paper here. It said this. Okay. It like stores it as a paper in the brain. It's weird, but that's just how the brain works. My brain works. So that personally what worked for me. But laptops, I mean, I don't know. I imagine, like, surely they've gotten better to the point, like, being able to, like, erase and move stuff and properly organize things probably help some people with studying. I can also see it hurting people too, though. I don't know. Either way, limit the supportive. Embrace the transformative. Lean into technology only when it allows students to do something they cannot do with pen and paper. This includes learning to write code, running complex scientific simulations, editing digital media, or collaborating globally. I remember in high school we had a class that was all about using computers, and like you'd go to the class, a really old guy teaching it, didn't care about anything, kind of just, you got to do these things by the end of the year, here you go. And one of them was like Flash, And I made, like, as a young high schooler, I made such violent Flash animations. I mean, I think they were pretty good by Flash animation standards. Oh, I missed that. Flash is gone now. But that was always one of the projects I would do every year. Just Flash animations. Like, you know those Flash fights that are on YouTube that you see sometimes, like stick figure fights. 100% that as a high schooler. Other than that, there was like learning Photoshop. You take pictures and then you'd have to Photoshop. Some, like, the people in my class were creative. There was some crazy Photoshop. One of the projects for Photoshop was you took one of the movie posters and you had to put yourself into the movie poster as one of the characters, and like essentially like remake the movie poster to take that person out and put yourself in. Great fun. They were all hilarious. Okay, embrace the transformative. Yep. Write code. I never got into coding until I was in university. Science and editing, digital media. Yep. Oh. Okay, something tells me this is a really poor example of the tech ed triangle. Let's look up an actual picture of the tech ed triangle. Images. They're different. I don't like this. This reminds me of the food pyramid, which, I mean, have we all agreed that the food pyramid was a disaster at this point? But this one looks like the best. Okay. Here we go. So stop. I don't care. Okay, transformative. Can you guys see the pyramid? I should move this. Okay, transformative. Produce a unique outcome or develop a high-level skill. Supportive, support learning in helpful ways used in moderation. Restrictive, restrict learning outcomes, use sparingly. Disruptive, disrupt learning and or breeds have habitual use, avoid using. So like TikTok finds itself down here, right? Any platform that exposes students to age inappropriate content or bullying. So basically all social media. Restricted access to cell phones during school hours. Tech for tech's sake. Needless screen-based homework assignments. Using screen time as a reward for using screen time as a reward. Like, I think that one's a pretty common parent strategy. If you do this, you'll be able to use your tablet for behavior management or for choice during a free time. Or as a choice during free time. Too much screen time. So, if that's disruptive, what is restrictive? E-text in place of print. Oh, I do this one all the time. I don't want to buy a book. Not when I can get it on my phone, usually for free. Prioritize typing over handwrite. Did anyone else have to like learn how to cursive? Do they still teach cursive? Do they still teach cursive writing? Like, is it still something you have to learn in schools? I hated cursive writing so much. I remember grade 8, my teacher telling me how important cursive was going to be, and you're going to have to use cursive for everything. And then I went to high school, first year of high school, and the guy beside me in my first class was writing in cursive, and I'm like, oh crap. Am I supposed to be writing in cursive for everything? And it freaked me out for like 2 days where I was trying to remember how to write in cursive because I never learned it. I didn't care about it. You don't need cursive. You don't need, like, I can do 4 letters in cursive and they spell my name. And do that to sign my name, and that's it. That's about it. That's all I know now. Yes, but it's much less universal than it used to be. Cursive largely disappeared from many schools after the adoption of the Common Core State Standard in the 2010s. Because those standards did not specifically require cursive instruction, many schools shifted more time towards keyboards and digital literacy. Probably a good idea. Cursive has not done me well. Cursive has not aged well. Where was I? Using software or applications that have already been mastered by the student, such as taking pictures with a tablet, points-based learning games. Okay. I think we've got enough of this. Let's go back to where we were. So, transformative, supportive, passive, and disruptive. Ban/restrict. Okay. At home, guard the brain anchors. Ooh, what are the brain anchors? At home, the strategy shouldn't just be about tracking a strict screen time clock, but rather preventing screens from crowding out the fundamental biological pillars of cognitive development. So, when I was going through school, the only place with a computer when I was like really young, so like earlier public school, was the library. And once in a while you get to go to the library and you get to play this circus game. And it was like a math and like puzzle game. And I remember this so clearly because my sister has a little kid. And she has essentially the modernized version of the circus learning game on her kid's tablet. And so when her kid wants like screen time, they gotta play the learning game. If you want to ensure a child is mentally resilient, you must fiercely protect 3 areas from digital encroachment. Protect deep sleep. The U.S. Surgeon General issued an advisory warning that excess screen use is driving a youth sleep and mental health crisis. Did I mean like I've definitely had this, but usually it's when I'm reading a good book or watching a good show or something, and then you're just like, oh well, I mean I could sleep tomorrow. Device screens emit blue light. Can't you turn that off? Like, I'm pretty sure I turned. I'm pretty sure I turned the blue light filter off a long time ago on this one. Oh, it's called Eye Comfort Shield. I swear it used to be called blue light filter. What changes? Oh my gosh, it gets so much more blue. Whoa. It gets so much more blue. Have I just been like living my life without the color blue on my phone? Anyway, device screens emit blue light that suppress melatonin, and the high stimulus content keep the brain alert. I mean that's just so. You gotta find something you can do before bed that doesn't activate the brain, because whenever I like think about a good book or something that I'm reading, that's when I can't sleep. You can't do high stimulus content before bed. A strict rule of no devices in bedrooms after a certain hour is the single highest leverage boundary a parent can set. I mean, that's probably just a good idea. Don't let them have their tablet in their room late at night. Force boredom and unstructured play. When a child is handled a tablet, the moment they complain of boredom, like in the car or at a restaurant, I remember long car rides as a kid, and we didn't have nothing. We made games like you would go like you count like A B C D, and you'd have to find it on signs and stuff like that. Oh, the sound came back. We were between songs. Like you just silly little games like that on our way because we would, as kids, we would go down to Florida every once in a while because we have family that lived down there in the U.S. Family that could get us in to Disneyland, like the best type of family. They could get us into Disneyland for free because they all worked higher up in Disney somewhere. So that was great. That was great. Um, but long car rides with nothing to do. They are robbed of the opportunity to develop executive functioning. Oh, so like the game of A B C D counting up like that's executive functioning. That felt like boredom to me. Boredom is the catalyst for imagination, self-regulation, and internal problem solving. Really? Boredom's important. I'd have never guessed. Delay the personal smartphone. As leaders globally, including recent campaigns by public health officials, are arguing, delay giving children unrestricted data connected smartphones for as long as possible. If communication is necessary, rely on a basic dump phone as a smart or a smart watch without access to algorithmic social media feeds. Well, this comes into like the kids should just be banned from social media. I mean, if you give them a phone, um, there's always going to be some kind of social media or something that they'll be able to find and use. But and so I guess this is probably your best bet to that if you delay the smartphone in its entirety. Um, just checking something. All right. But at the same time, like, basic dump phone or smartwatch. I guess that's a solution until governments can figure that one out. Until they can figure out how to keep kids off social media. Even then, there's always like Roblox isn't considered social media despite having all the hallmarks of social media. They consider it a game. And so there's always going to be things and ways around it. That's just I think that one's important. I honestly all these are just all important for kids. Summary. The two pillars of future proofing. The best suit children to best suit children for the future, we have to teach them a dual skill set: how to think deeply without technology, protecting their inner attention spans, reading, stamina, and capacity for deep focus. I think this is the one that we're having a lot of issues with right now. Number two, how to use technology as a tool, not a master. Shift them from passive consumer targeted by engagement algorithm into active creators who control the machine. Okay, so like productive based stuff rather than scrolling. The issue is, in my opinion, right now it's so like before this social media, it's like you didn't have to worry about all this stuff. Like the access, once they have like a personal smartphone, um, or like an internet connected device, they have so much more access, and there's like so much more you have to be worried about. Um, and in my opinion, it requires additional parenting in order to prevent an issue from arising from this. And one of the issues that I see is that in today's world, we ask so much of parents. Like, if I'm not mistaken, aren't like don't people work longer hours than ever now? Let me check that one. I remember hearing a statistic that over the past 50 years or so, the family unit has lost about 35 hours of discretionary time. Can you go into more detail for me? Is this a true statistic? Are people working longer hours now? Okay. Punctuation when I stop. Is this a true statistic? Are people working longer hours now? Yes, that's what I want to know. Because from my understanding, we are asking more and more from parents. At the same time, we're also asking them, like we're asking them more for work. At the same time, we're asking them to do more for their kids and to be better parents while giving them less time to do parenting. The statistic you are remembering is essentially true, though economists and societists phrase it slightly differently. It stems from a landmark shift in family dynamics and labor economics over the last several decades. The original data behind this idea points to a collective time squeeze on the modern household. Rather than an individual worker losing 35 hours of free time a week, the family unit as a whole has added roughly 500 to 600 hours of paid work to its plate per year compared to 50 years ago. When you break that annual number down, it equates to losing roughly 10 to 12 hours a week of collective family leisure time, or a massive chunk of discretionary time once shared by the household. So the number is actually, family unit as a whole has added roughly 500 to 600 hours of paid work to its plate per year compared to 50 years ago. Okay. Which equates to losing roughly 10 to 12 hours a week of collective family leisure time, or a massive chunk of discretionary time once shared by the household. Like this is largely like, not only is it people working longer hours, but it's women moving into the workforce, right? The woman used to primarily stay at home and take care of the kids, maybe have a part-time job. But as they've moved into the workforce more prominently, there is less collective family leisure time, and that's parenting time, right? So now you have less parenting time a week. The reality of how we arrived at this time deficit comes down to a few major factors. Are individual people working longer hours? Surprisingly, not significantly. If you look at the average single full-time worker, their individual weekly hours have remained relatively flat over the past 50 years, hovering around 39 to 42 hours a week in both Canada and the US. So hours haven't really gone up. I mean, if anything, I think hours should be going down. Where's our 4-day work week? Come on. The illusion that individuals are working vastly more hours comes from a few specific trends. The professional divide: high income salary professionals are working longer hours, often pushing 50 to 60 a week, compounded by smartphones making them reachable. Oh, that's the horrible one, making them reachable 24/7. Meanwhile, lower income workers are often locked in a battleground for enough hours, juggling multiple part-time gig economy jobs. The commute: people are living further from urban job centers due to housing costs, meaning discretionary time is heavily eaten up by longer drives or transit times that don't officially count as work hours. Oh, yeah. Like where I work now, that's not really an issue, but um, I used to have like a 45-minute drive, and that's an hour and a half a day. The other place I used to work, it was terrible. Hour and a half in the car. I mean, with today's gas prices, that would have been commute must suck. Like, I fill up every other week now because I just over there. The real culprit, the rise of the dual earner. Here we go. The rise of the dual earner household. If individuals aren't averaging 70 hours weeks, why does the family feel so starved for time? The answer lies in the structural shift from single earner households to dual earner households. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the dominant economic model for a family with children was a single breadwinner, usually the father, working full-time, while the other parent managed the household. So 1970s, single earners 40 hours plus the homemaker 0 hours, so 40 hours a week. And 2020s, dual earners. Isn't that a huge difference? Dual earners from 75 to 80 hours. That's a 40 hour increase. Why does it say the family unit as a whole has added roughly 500 to 600 hours of paid work? I guess this is a slow process, right? Like in the 1970s, you definitely had some. You had people that had already adopted this model of dual earners, and that progress, I imagine that progress has continued onto today, where it's usually the common model is dual earners now. And so when you see the progress slowly continuing, then that's led to the 10 hours. The 10 to 12 hours of less time. Where was I? Here. Data from Statistics Canada and the US Bureau of Labor Statistics show that in the mid-1970s, dual earning couples made up roughly 1/3. Yeah, okay. So there was quite a few already. 1/3 of families with children. Today, nearly 3/4 of families with children are dual earners. So it's by far the normal. So 2/3, most children don't have a parent at home. When both parents work, the total number of hours a family dedicates to the labor market nearly doubles. Where did the discretionary time go? When a household goes from contributing 40 hours of labor a week to 80, a massive structural deficit is created. The chores, grocery shopping, cooking, childcare, and home maintenance don't vanish just because both parents are at work. Instead, those tasks get pushed into the evening and weekends. So as more time is spent at work, your free time is what disappears, because there's a certain amount of time that is always going to be dedicated to grocery shopping, cooking, childcare, and home maintenance. That doesn't go away. Those are all static. You still got to get groceries. You still have to cook. You still need time with the kids, and you still need home maintenance. And so, as it says, it's discretionary time that is getting squeezed. Because Saturdays and Sundays have become a second shift of unpaid domestic labor just to keep the household running, the actual discretionary time, the peaceful, unscripted hours where a family can just sit together, play, talk, or rest, has been aggressively hollowed out. Ultimately, families haven't lost time because individuals are slaving away for 80 hours a week at a desk. They've lost time because running a modern household now requires 2 full-time incomes to keep up with standard living costs and housing, leaving very little open space on the family calendar. Yeah. Which means, like, if you have less discretionary time, you have less parenting time. And we're entering an environment where, if anything, we're demanding more of parents at a time when they have less time to provide that. Honestly, it's a recipe for disaster. I think personally, like, we should go to like a 4-day work week, because I hear that's happening in some countries, and that would give 16 hours back to a dual income family, right? More than make up for the 10 to 12 that have been lost over the last 50 years. I mean, that's what I think, but okay, I've gotten off topic. What were we talking about? The 2 pillars of future proofing, how to deep think without technology, how to use technology as a tool and not a master. I guess we kind of summed that up already. Yeah. So, final verdict. The pandemic screwed everyone, and especially children in school. And there are very noticeable declines because of that. Outside of that, in my opinion, it looks like children are adapting to their environment. I don't think that they have gotten dumber. I think they are adapting to a different world that requires a different set of skills, and we can manipulate the incentives, like through something like a social media ban for kids, which is something I absolutely think we should be doing. That we can manipulate the incentives, but children are gonna adapt to the incentives of the world, and it's kind of on us to decide what those incentives are. And right now, it favors, what was it, like visual processing, high-speed visual processing. I don't know. I'm probably not gonna be able to find that. We're going way too far back now. But the modern world requires different tasks. The adaptation method, the takeaway. Where was the big one? I'm so lost. I've been talking about this for too long. All right. Well, I don't think kids are getting dumber. I think they're adapting to the world they live in and the incentive structures we have created. We can create new incentive structures. In the end, the 2 pillars of future proofing, the best suit children for the future. We have to teach them a dual skill set: how to think deeply without technology, protecting their linear attention span, reading stamina, and capacity for deep focus. 2, how to use technology as a tool, not a master, shifting them from passive consumers targeted by engagement algorithms into active creators who control the machine. I think that's a good place to end it.